mystery that cannot be explained. An enigma that defies reason. A surprising and unexpected answer. To encounter such a mystery firsthand may change your life forever. Face to face with the greatest riddles of the ages, the world's most profound mysteries reach out and touch your life in ways you never imagined possible. Extreme Mysteries.
The southern end of the Dead Sea is believed to be in the ancient land of Canaan, site of the legendary cities of Sin, Sodom, and Gomorrah. Here it is said Abraham and his family came and settled, and Lot, Abraham's nephew, became a successful merchant in the city of Sodom. According to the Bible, these cities of the plain were utterly destroyed by fire and brimstone. But did these cities even exist? Have scholars, investigators, and archaeologists finally found the ancient sites on the plain of Jordan? Were there really two cities called Sodom and Gomorrah, so wicked they were utterly destroyed by God? Could it be there were 3, 4, or even 5 cities?
To see for myself. No!
Has evidence been found that proves the biblical account and actually pinpoints the exact site of the 5 cities? Have the experts finally found evidence of these cities' cataclysmic destruction? It is one of the most hotly debated stories in the Bible, but archaeological discoveries are shedding new light on old arguments. In a moment, we'll see what this new light reveals. One of the major archaeological mysteries that still perplexes scientists and biblical scholars alike is the location of the 5 cities of the plain, named in the Bible as Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. Their whereabouts would probably be of little or no concern beyond archaeological curiosity, except for one thing: the way in which these cities were supposed to have been destroyed. According to the Bible, God rained down fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah and destroyed them utterly. Over the centuries, skeptics have questioned not only where these cities might have been, but did they exist at all?
Why all the fuss over Sodom and Gomorrah? It's a mythological, moralistic story. The cities never existed. This story and other stories were used by the high priests to instill fear and guilt among its followers.
Sodom and Gomorrah certainly did exist, but were destroyed by a massive fire and brimstone explosion, as described in the Bible.
The argument has been going on for generations, and up to now, it has never seemed to get resolved. But recent discoveries have changed the nature of the discussion. Sources other than the Bible are now being consulted, and the points of contention are becoming more focused on where the cities were and less on whether or not they actually existed. But one question always remains. Did the cataclysmic event that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah actually happen as recorded in the Bible? Or was it a tale invented by some early scribe to teach a frightening moral and religious lesson? To begin our investigation, let's see what the Bible itself has to say about it, beginning with Abraham and his traveling companion and nephew, Lot. According to the biblical account, Abraham had come down into Canaan with his nephew Lot from the cities of Ur and Haran. Here they had prospered and grown wealthy, so much so that they had divided up their herds and had taken separate paths. Abraham was a man who was known far and wide as one who had found favor in the eyes of God, and he was greatly respected. Then one day, 3 men approached Abraham as he sat in the door of his tent. Their appearance was different than that of most travelers, but all travelers were to be made welcome.
Peace be with you, brothers, and welcome to my tent. Will you not rest and refresh yourself in the shade and take a poor meal with us before you go on?
Still, there was something about these three that made Abraham give them special attention. He told his wife to bake fresh bread, selected a choice tender calf, and ordered his servants to prepare it. Then he brought curds and milk and set it before them. When his visitors got up to leave, Abraham walked along with them. They started down the road toward Sodom, but one of the three lagged behind, and Abraham found himself in the presence of the Lord. He was told the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah was great, and that the Lord was about to destroy the cities completely.
But my Lord God, my nephew and his family live in the city of Sodom. Certainly thee would not destroy the good along with the bad.
At length the Lord relents and tells Abraham he will save the city if but 10 righteous people can be found. Apart from Sodom being the home of his nephew Lot, one wonders why Abraham would plead so diligently to save a city and a people of whom he obviously disapproved. What was there about this dusty desert town that made it seem valuable to Abraham?
It is naive to assume that the climate of Palestine has remained the same from ancient times as it is today. We know that in the past there were heavy forest lands and grasslands. This kind of terrain would be present in southern Palestine around the Sodom and Gomorrah area, would certainly have been able to support not only a wide range of domesticated animals, but also there is much evidence that the land supported a wild animal population that's not unlike North Africa. And so in Abraham's time, this particular part of the world was capable of supporting his flocks, and he could make a grand living in this part of the world.
Which brings up another point. Among the sins of the Sodomites, Ezekiel lists pride, fullness of bread, abundance of idleness, haughtiness, and being unwilling to strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. How did these city dwellers get to be so wealthy?
Slime pits may be the answer. Bitumen was used all over the ancient world and was a very valuable commodity.
It was used as a coating for the burnt mud bricks as well as in the mortar, and it was used to provide a watertight caulking. Noah's Ark, for example, was covered with pitch inside and out. In its various forms, bitumen was in high demand in the ancient world. In the Ebla tablets, it is listed as one of the most valuable and expensive commodities. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah had it all over the place, right in their front yard.
The biblical record states the two angels approached Sodom in the evening. Preparations were underway for a great pagan celebration. Lot was preparing to return to his home when he spotted what appeared to be two strangers coming into the city. So Lot invited them to spend the night with him, but they refused. Lot, however, knowing the attitudes of the people, persisted.
Come, I beg you, and abide the dark hours inside with us.
The strangers relented and accepted his offer, but it was not to be the quiet evening at home Lot had hoped for. They had barely finished their evening meal when a great tumult arose outside. The revelers had heard of the presence of the two strangers at Lot's house, and they quickly gathered there, demanding that Lot turn the strangers over to them. According to the Bible, Lot wanted to protect his guests from the unruly and lewd mob, but there was nothing he could do. Lot's guests, however, took charge. And when they stepped outside, the revelers were struck blind. Unable to find the door to Lot's house, they dispersed in panic. The two angels then told Lot to take his wife and daughters and leave Sodom.
Hurry, there's little time. And do not look back.
Interestingly, they told Lot not to stop anywhere on the plain. Apparently, more than just Sodom and Gomorrah were under condemnation. But is there any non-biblical evidence that these cities existed, or that they were destroyed in some sort of flaming catastrophe?
In 1978, Professor Giovanni Pettinato of the University of Rome published an ancient cuneiform tablet known as the Ebla Geographical Atlas. This comes from the mid-3rd millennium BC. It's a list which contains the names of 290 ancient place names. These names come from Syria and from Canaan. Of the 290 names, several of these bear upon Genesis 14 and the cities of the plain. Name number 210 is Admah in its old Canaanite form with a final feminine T. Immediately following that, name number 211 is Sodom, clear to read and phonetically equivalent with the biblical Sodom. 8 names later comes the name of Aqabu, the modern Aqaba, which is the Gulf at the northeast end of the Red Sea. This name of Aqaba gives us a very important clue as to where this Sodom is located. That puts it in southern Transjordan. That's where the biblical Sodom was located.
One of the biggest reasons for locating Sodom and Gomorrah toward the southern end of the Dead Sea is because of its association with the city of Zoar. It was to Zoar that Lot and his daughters fled after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Zoar is located, according to the Medeba mosaic map, discovered a few years ago in a Byzantine church in what is now Jordan, in the southeast area of the Dead Sea region.
Much has been made of this mosaic map, and for years, archaeologists have settled on a series of small ruins near the southeast corner of the Dead Sea as the likely location of all 5 cities of the plain. But is that location supportable in light of more recent discoveries? Is there evidence that fire and brimstone, or burning stones, actually destroyed the cities? Have other locations been found that more closely fit the biblical and historic definitions? Is it possible now to say the exact sites of all 5 of the plain's cities have been found? Clues by the fistful when we return. The location of the 5 cities of the plain, as they are described in the Bible, has long been the subject of speculation and research. Archaeologists and biblical scholars have settled on 1 or 2 spots that appear to offer some possibilities. One of these sites is today located under the waters of the southern tip of the Dead Sea. Another is on the Jordanian side of the Dead Sea, where 5 archaeological sites have been located. But there are problems. No one has been able to get to the underwater sites to confirm whether the structures there are natural or man-made. And the 5 Jordanian sites have been called into question by some archaeologists and Bible scholars. Does the biblical story provide any other details we could examine?
There is another problem with these Jordanian sites. They're just too small to be cities. The largest is only 10 acres, and many of the other ones are as small as 2 acres. The NIV translation of Genesis 19:24 states, "The Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of heaven." Only Lot, his wife, and their 2 daughters were supposed to be spared.
The Bible also gives us another clue as to what happened. The angel had warned them not to look back.
I want to see for myself. No!
It appears to be that not only Lot and his family were leaving, but the whole city was trying to escape the flames and the fumes of the volcano that was erupting from the bottom of the sea. The angel led them through the gate of the city, but Lot's wife turned back, and these turned to pillars of salt as they were asphyxiated by the fumes, deadly fumes of the sulfuric acid that comes from fire and brimstone.
If all of this is true, shouldn't there be some residue of sulfur and ash at the authentic sites? And what about the pillar of salt that was Lot's wife? Could anything like that have actually happened?
In 1984, we went into the Dead Sea area and found that the Dead Sea had gone down about 30 to 40 feet, and the water had receded back from the shoreline about 1,800 to 2,000 feet. As we walked out to the water's edge, we found cocoons of bodies encased in salt and gypsum.
This shell is 8 foot across, and it collapsed while it was underwater, exposing the corpse.
There was a body laying next to an alligator 16 foot long. There was a couple embracing and a baby laying on the chest of the parent.
Here's the head of the child. Here's the legs down here, and over here is the shoulder and the elbow of the parent, and the arm crosses across in the center.
There was a crust of about 4 to 6 inches thick on the outside, and ashen soot about 2 to 3 to 4 inches thick inside.
The Dead Sea has always been the world's most saline body of water. Imagine Lot and his family attempting to escape across the shallow water on the southern end of the Dead Sea. Poison gases, ash from volcanic activity, the ground shaking with an earthquake. Passing across the shallow water, perhaps Lot's wife was overcome by the volcanic gases and simply collapsed into the shallow water. In a short period of time, she would become encrusted with salt, and one may very well speak of a pillar of salt.
We are told that Abraham looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. In the final analysis, the crux of the argument over the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and apparently all the land of the plain, boils down to a single question: did it happen?
After reading the description of the destruction of these cities from the Bible, you get a picture of what you would expect to find. It would be a place where there is ash, sulfur, evidence of burning. It would be a place uninhabited, where nothing would grow.
The biblical account of Sodom and Gomorrah speaks of the raining fire and brimstone. It speaks of the ground rising as the smoke of a furnace into the air. A typical volcanic eruption would involve the fire of molten rock. It would involve the smoke of the gases and ash from the volcanic eruption. Earthquakes, volcanic activity will explain all of the things that we read in the biblical account.
There are 5 different kinds of volcanoes, and the Bible mentions the volcano. It was fire and brimstone. And brimstone, when it hits water, turns to sulfuric acid and to salt and gypsum and potash, of the different chemicals that are there. So this is the evidence that it was fire and brimstone volcano, evidently erupting from the bottom of the Dead Sea, creating 1,300 feet of depth into the Dead Sea that didn't used to exist.
So it is possible for the cities to have been destroyed pretty much the way the book of Genesis says they were. The question still remaining is, has the location of those cities been discovered?
Archaeologists have excavated at least 3 out of these 5 sites along the Dead Sea, and they've discovered that all 3 of them were apparently terminated abruptly towards the end of the early Bronze Age at approximately the same time. That abrupt destruction has intrigued people because it's not just a termination. There's actually an ash layer on a couple of these city ruins, and it suggests that the city was destroyed by fire. Some scholars have suggested that perhaps if there's not a historical connection there, that the event that occurred towards the end of the early Bronze Age at least is reflected in the biblical account about Sodom and Gomorrah later on. Another interesting thing is that scholars have noticed that of the 5 wadis that drain off the plain into the Dead Sea area, these 5 streams, they have located near the northernmost 2 wadis a couple of large cemeteries. At Baba Dra in particular, they found that at least 50,000 individuals were buried there. The Jordan Archaeological Museum contains a number of artifacts from Baba Dra, one of the 5 cities located along the southeast shore of the Dead Sea. We'll now go on inside the museum and look at a few of these artifacts. The ancient city of Baba Dra, which some scholars have associated with biblical Sodom, was of course lived in for a number of centuries prior to its abrupt termination. These cases in the Jordan Archaeological Museum actually contain artifacts from those earlier centuries of occupation that came right out of the graves, the shaft tombs that we discussed a few moments ago. You can see various storage jars and weapons that were buried with the individuals in the cemetery. I hold in my hand one of the small juglets that came from the earlier part of the occupation at Baba Dra, a small juglet with a flat bottom, very typical of that period.
The problem some archaeologists have with the Jordanian Babadera site is that it is only ash. There's no sulfur or brimstone, as the Bible would say. And Sodom, the actual site of Sodom, should have brimstone present.
Members of the Ron Wyatt Foundation found evidence in 1989 that the 5 cities of the plain were not concentrated just at the end of the Dead Sea, but rather form a line from just below the southern tip of the Dead Sea all the way to about 10 miles or so above the northern tip.
But what was it Ron Wyatt had discovered that made him think he was looking at the ruins of the 5 cities?
The destruction of these cities took place nearly 4,000 years ago, so it's quite amazing to find any remains. But the fact is, people have been driving by, and in one case a road has been cut through the ashen heaps without ever suspecting that they were in fact the ruins we believe to be the remains of the city. Peter tells us the cities were reduced to ash, and Josephus points out that the traces or shadows of the 5 cities are still to be seen. These ruins are not composed of the kind of ash we commonly think of that blows away in the wind. It was compacted ash, densely packed and crusty on the outside, but when broken open, the substance was much softer. In some places, the loose ash is amazingly deep. I stepped into one spot and sank in up to my waist. When one knows what to look for, the structure of a city becomes obvious. Walls, streets, ziggurats, even sphinx-like shapes are easily discernible, and the dimensions of these ruins are more in line with what might truly be called a city. The largest being Sodom, which is in fact located near Mount Siddim and covers more than 140 acres.
Even though these discoveries seem to go against the prevailing wisdom, the locations and the archaeological and scientific evidence appears to be quite compelling. Certainly this theory places Zoar close enough to Sodom to give Lot and his family time enough to reach it safely, and the depth and prevalence of the ash fits the description of the destruction. But there is still that pesky idea of sulfur falling from the sky.
With a background in chemistry, I found the balls of sulfur to be the most exciting discovery of all. I was able to gather up several balls of various sizes, some the size of a thumbnail, others as big as an egg. Actually, thousands of these balls of sulfur have been found and collected. Except here in these ruins, sulfur balls like these are very rare. It's almost as if the evidence that proves the biblical account has been miraculously preserved along with the site itself. The Bible indicates that the event that destroyed these cities had a supernatural origin. We don't know the exact way it came about, but what we do know is that these burning balls of sulfur rained down upon the cities. We know this because the sulfur has been tested and has been shown to have been on fire. As it rained down, all the flammable objects in the city began to burn, and the heat from the burning sulfur began to build up over time. It's been estimated that temperatures of up to 4,000 degrees would have been reached. This would easily create the kind of furnace-like smoke that Abraham saw along the plain. The evidence from these sites fits not only the biblical account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but other relevant scripture as well. I believe that we have indeed found abundant evidence that these are the remains of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah.
It will likely take some time for the archaeologists, geologists, chemists, and other scholars to sort out the conflicting claims. But eventually, there should be some kind of consensus. In the meantime, biblical scholars have more to work with than they have ever had before, and once again, science and religion have an opportunity to demonstrate they work better together than apart. Still, one of the most fascinating aspects of these new discoveries is that they have been there, in plain sight, for everyone to see for ages. Are there other things about our world that we've been too busy to really notice? How much truth is there in the old adage, you can't see the forest for the trees?